We are doing a question and answer session about Skittle oils with Phil at 4,800 feet and myself, I'm Anne. And Phil, tell the audience a little bit about yourself here. I know you've been doing YouTube videos and sharing information for quite a while already.
Well, I've been freeze drying for maybe 4 years now, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's a little bit addictive, and I've been enjoying doing the videos and trying to get information out to correct perhaps things that are not quite accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I can certainly appreciate that. And 4 years is definitely a good chunk of time to have learned a lot and be able to share a lot of information with everybody. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do as well. And then last time I checked, and I know this is growing, you have 13,000 subscribers and you've done 220 videos, but there's more. Probably since I put this together, you've got even more than that now.
That's pretty close. I try to do a video a week.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know I appreciate it. And then for those of you, I'm kind of new on the freeze drying scene, but what I'm trying to do is I've started a Facebook group, and I too am trying to get helpful and accurate information out to the freeze drying community so that we can all freeze dry more confidently, help each other out, and just have a better time. You know what I mean? Help each other. Collaboration, I believe, is very important.
I agree.
So when my husband and I watched your amazing series of videos about the Skittles oil, our first impression was we were suddenly scared to do Skittles. Our machine is very new, and we were both nervous about, oh no, what if we get the Skittles oil? Should we not even try Skittles? And I was so disappointed because one of the very first food items that I purchased when we knew our machine was on the way were bags of Skittles. I was looking forward to really doing some for the holidays and, to send to family for presents and things like that. And I have a feeling that maybe some other people that saw your videos may have gotten the same impression. So I wanted to get together with you and just kind of go over some of the questions and answers that we shared that, kind of answer that concern.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so one of the things I had asked was, how are people running load after load of Skittles in their freeze dryers without causing any damage? Or are they causing damage and they just don't know? Because that was a big concern. Nobody wants to do any harm to their machine.
Well, the first thing I want to say that Skittles do not damage your machine by any means. Give you a little bit of brief history about this Skittle oil video. Is I stumbled upon a much easier way to do Skittles and other candies without having to go through the entire free candy mode that could last anywhere from 6 to 8 hours or even longer. And while doing the research on that video, I've had comments in the past from other individuals about black gooey oil that is coming out of people's vacuum pumps. And about the same time, I had a buddy of mine have the same problem. He brought me his vacuum pump, and that's what really started it. We verified that he had this dark, goopy oil in it, and that started the research to find out what was causing that.
And actually, I did see your video on the faster way to do Skittles, and we actually plan on trying that very thing. Why spend 6 to 8 hours when the same result is accomplished in 30 minutes to an hour? Why not make things more efficient, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
And you had answered, there's no problem with doing Skittles unless you have a dirty pump. And I think that was the part that we were kind of confused on. We thought, oh no, Skittles pump, one doesn't cause the other. It's the fact that you had a dirty pump to begin with that causes the oil because of the palm kernel oil, mixing with the dirty rust inside of the pump. So like you pointed out, if you have a clean pump, skittle away to your heart's content. And that made me so happy to hear, because I was, like I said, I was so disappointed I couldn't do the Skittles, but now I can with confidence. And that was one of the big takeaways, that I got from our Q&A. So here was my next question. I said, in your video, you showed the pump getting all kinds of goop inside. And when you took it apart to clean it out, you were able to show what that looked like. And then my immediate thought was, uh-oh, probably not many other people are taking the time or have the knowledge to take the pump apart. And does that mean things are just building up, inside? And then, of course, that got me thinking, if there's things building up, how long until it just quits working altogether? Because, when machinery isn't maintained and things build up, they just kind of seize.
That's correct. And maybe I need to backpedal just a little bit here and
Sure.
explain how that garbage can build up in pumps. Most of the foods that we eat on a pH scale are acidic, and that doesn't mean we're eating acid. It's a matter of fact that most of the foods are acidic on the pH scale, not being alkaline. And the Premier pump does a pretty good job in removing any moisture that comes out of the freeze dryer, but it doesn't catch everything. And so some of that moisture can get past the gas ballast, and that moisture is going to be pH acidic. And inside an iron and steel pump, that acidic vapor is going to start rusting and causing corrosion inside the vacuum pump. And that is where most of this crud will start building up. And not only that, but you also get microparticulates of food that will leave the freeze dryer and also go into the vacuum pump. So you have a combination of rust that could build up, plus you're also getting particulates of food building up in the vacuum pump. And you get a little bit of moisture, you get a little bit of food, and add some warmth in there, and you can actually get some bacterium to start to grow. And that's why in some of my videos, I strongly suggest that at the end of each load, and Harvest Right basically recommends, I think, to change the oil every 6 to 8 loads or so, but I've chosen to change my oil after every load. And I think it's important when oil is changed that you change it when it's hot, so that the oil, which has a tendency to be, the viscosity has a tendency to be a little bit thinner, can flow out of the pump faster than trying to drain colder oil. And if you tilt the pump just a little bit, and Harvest Right in their latest brochure does not recommend tilting the pump, but I went back to the manufacturer and talked to them about that, and they don't see any problem with that. So
That makes
there's
sense.
a little bit of a disagreement perhaps with Harvest Right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you change the oil when it's hot and leave the valve open until you use it again, because when things go between hot and cold, you can get condensation inside, and that's just bringing more moisture into the pump.
Yep.
So leave the pump tilted, leave the valve open, drain it when it's hot until you're using it again. So with that being said, if you're just freeze drying every now and then, you have all that stuff building up inside, and that's what leads to this black crud that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And those are all extremely interesting points. So I have a couple of quick questions. How often, if people are running back-to-back loads, obviously letting it defrost, getting the water out in between each load as directed. But if people are, for the most part, doing a load as soon as they can, throughout the week, how often would you suggest that they take, that apart and just kind of give it a clean out, per one of your excellent instruction videos? Every quarter, every 6 months, once a year?
I would not take the vacuum pump apart unless it's necessary, for a couple of reasons. Is Harvest Right is working on getting replacement parts for the Premier pump, but they're not all in yet. And I'd hate to see someone take the cover off the pump, damage the O-ring gasket, and not being able to replace it, and now their pump is kind of dead in the water.
Good point.
I would only take the pump apart if you do get that dark, gooey oil coming out of it. A long time ago, Harvest Right, with their standard pump, had some procedures on power flushing, and I do show that in one of those videos. That is one remedy to do before taking the pump apart. Taking the pump apart would probably be the last ditch effort in cleaning all the residue out.
Okay, got it. Yeah, we certainly don't want anyone to unnecessarily take things apart, especially if, warranty issues are involved or anything like that. I was just curious, what your thoughts were on something like that.
Well, like I said, only if necessary, but if you're doing back-to-back loads, you still have about an hour, 2 hour between loads that you could still, change out the oil and filter it through that little Harvest Right pitcher, and then replace the oil with some clean oil and still sweep everything out of the pump. I think the problem, the Skittle oil, is going to affect people who probably freeze dry less frequent.
And it's just sitting for longer periods of time and then giving it a chance for the moisture to affect the pump more.
That is correct. Not only the moisture, but the buildup of bacteria, because you could have food particulates in there, moisture in there, and that just makes a really good breeding environment.
That's true. So basically, we've got more incentive to just kind of keep our freeze dryers more active. That's great.
It's an expensive, thing that you bought, so you might as well use it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And then you had pointed out too that the pump that you used in your video belonged to a friend, who didn't take as good of care, as he could and should have. And again, a reminder just to change the oil. That keeps it clean. So I kind of, half of me wonders, like, did this pump just kind of get, sit in a corner somewhere for a long time? And that's kind of why it went into neglect. I mean, I'm sure there's a million different scenarios.
Yeah, he was an individual that when he first got his machine, he freeze dried a lot, and I guess things kind of fell off, and then he would maybe just freeze dry every now and then for a camping trip. And so it pretty much just kind of was in the corner for most of the time. With the oil in it, I'd probably recommend that if you're going to store it for any period of time, to drain the oil out of it.
Definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's actually in part of the manual that I was reading too, is saying, hey, if you're going on a long vacation, if you're not going to be freeze drying for a while, change the oil. That way it's not just sitting there with old oil.
Yep.
All right. And then one of my questions was, is this what's causing so many leaks or issues, with pumps for those that freeze dry candy? And, I feel a whole lot more confident about this whole thing after, going back and forth with you about the questions. It's not candy at all. It's just,
it's an ingredient in the candy. So when we first started getting this cruddy oil, we kind of thought, well, maybe this is just maybe some of the coloring that's coming off the Skittles. And so we bought the 2 different bags of Skittles, which I think comes down to about maybe 9 or 10 different colors, separated them, and we did loads of Skittles with nothing but each individual color. And then we monitored what was going on with the oil, and none of the colors of the Skittles were making it back to the pump to do anything to the oil. But we did stumble on some other information that you can make pretty little designs and stuff with the Skittles. It's almost like artwork.
I thought that was great.
So once we were able to factor the color of the Skittles not being the cause, we then assembled all the individual ingredients of the Skittles and then started freeze drying each individual ingredients. And there's quite a few unusual ingredients that we had to collect. And it wasn't until we got to the hydrogenated palm kernel oil that, when that was placed into the freeze dryer and went under vacuum, it actually would gas out, and some of those gases or vapors from the hydrogenated palm kernel oil made its way back to the pump, and those fumes or vapors had a releasing effect upon any iron deposits in the pump. And so that vapor would then release the iron deposits that were on the surfaces of the pump, and then those deposits would mix with the oil, making everything go dark and goopy.
And I really liked the way you kind of broke it down and did your troubleshooting in stages, trying to see if there was an effect with the colors of Skittles. Was it the different ingredients of the Skittles? And then finally you stumbled on what you did. So that was a very, very thorough approach. And I can definitely appreciate something like that.
And it's a little bit of my downfall because I don't just want to tell someone a quick yes or no answer to show them something. I kind of go through step by step what I do, and that kind of makes some of my videos go a little bit long and
Mm-hmm.
maybe longer than some people want to watch. But I like to be able to prove what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I'm the kind of person that appreciates the details, and I appreciate how you kind of went through possibilities, and I like the way you explain things. So that was one of the reasons I had reached out to you, because I was really impressed with the way that you do things. Like, for example, you even took the time to do the oil analysis. And in your video, you showed line item by line item, hey, here are the comparisons. I found that extremely fascinating.
Yeah, I found it pretty interesting on what was in that oil too.
I'm glad that this company was able to do that for you.
I've given that company a lot of business.
All right. And then I had the next question was, one of the things that I found very fascinating was that you had taken off the demister, you took it apart, and you showed what it looked like. And I was thinking, oh, there's not really a good way to clean these. So did that mean it was completely ruined? And, you had to buy a new one because, of course, everybody wants to make their pieces and parts last as long as possible. And then you had mentioned that you actually already had one on hand. So is that because you're just kind of a prepared individual and you always have extra parts?
Harvest Right has sent me some of the premier pumps in the past to do videos on,
Oh,
and so
fantastic.
I kind of have bits and pieces of that. Plus Navvac, who I don't want to say Navvac is a parent company, but Navvac pumps are very, very similar to the Harvest Right pumps, and a lot of their parts will fit the premier pump. But I also have had a Navvac demister that I'm currently using.
That's great. Yeah, because certain pieces and parts we are also going to try to have on hand just in case we need them. But some things are just so expensive, you kind of want to, wait until you absolutely have to have it. So that's just kind of something to consider.
And Harvest Right does carry. I'm pretty sure when I was talking with them that Harvest Right does have some of the parts, like the demister. I think they may even have the oil seal gasket, but I'm not quite certain on that.
Well, you mentioned before they were putting together kind of like a little kit, for people. And I think there's going to be big demand for that because I know, my husband and I would love to have a little kit like that just kind of stashed away just in the event we needed it.
Yep, I agree.
And then my other question was, how do people have functioning equipment after running load after load of Skittles, if there's damage? Do people have no idea? What about the demister? Shouldn't we be talking more about this in the freeze drying community? And again, one of the big takeaways I had was that it's perfectly fine to do Skittles. You just have to make sure the pump is clean. So I wanted to make sure that we got the word out there because I'm sure there are other people that are just like, nope, not going to do it. I saw that Skittles oil, never again. I just want to make sure they understand that's not the case.
That is correct. You can run your freeze dryer with Skittles as many times as you want, as long as you have a clean pump, because that hydrogenated palm kernel oil will not have any effect on it. But if you have a dirty pump and you run Skittles, there's a good chance that any deposits you have in your pump will be released by the hydrogenated palm kernel oil and will mix with your vacuum pump oil.
Yeah, and basically, I guess the best thing to do would be to just immediately, change the oil, perhaps more than once.
Well, for me, I change the oil after every batch,
Mm,
but that's my personal preference. It takes it might take me 30 to 40 seconds to do it. It doesn't take long at all.
Probably got it down to a science by now. You've got all the
I
little
do.
equipment set around and you've got it just so can make it happen quickly. That's
Yep.
fantastic. Well, I tell you what, I really appreciate your time, helping me get the word out there about this information. I put together a little QR code for you so that people can use their phones and go straight to your videos. And you've got the part 1, part 2, and part 3, about the Skittle oil and the information. And of course, subscribe to Fill It 4,800 Feet. Part of the community. We have to help each other. It's kind of what it's all about. That's kind of my big thing. Collaboration, not competition, not combativeness. Let's help each other.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And as I always say, go forth and freeze dry the world.
Absolutely. I love it.